The morning sun crept over the cul-de-sac, bathing our quiet neighborhood in golden light. You'd think such a beautiful scene would bring peace, but peace had become a luxury ever since the arrival of our new HOA president, Karen. She was the type of woman who believed authority was her personal weapon, that rules existed only for others, and that her perfect neighborhood image mattered more than people's lives. That morning, I was inside making breakfast for my daughter Lily. She was 15, sweet, strong, and going through something no one her age should endure, chemotherapy. The treatments had taken a lot from her strength, her appetite, and most noticeably, her hair. Just a few days before, she had decided to shave her head completely. She said she didn't want to watch it fall out piece by piece anymore. I remember standing beside her in the bathroom as I gently ran the clippers over her scalp, trying not to cry while she smiled into the mirror, whispering, "Now I look brave, Dad." That bravery was something I held on to every single day. I was proud of her, more than I could ever express. But the world outside didn't always share that understanding. Especially not Karen. I was pouring coffee when I heard her shrill voice echoing through the neighborhood. "Excuse me. What are you doing out here?" she yelled. I looked out the window and saw her standing on our sidewalk, arms crossed, glaring at Lily. My daughter was sitting on the porch swing, reading a book, wrapped in her favorite blanket. I rushed out, heart thudding. "Karen, what's going on here?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. She spun around, her expression twisted with outrage. "You're your daughter. She's out here like this." She waved her hands at Lily as though she were pointing to something scandalous. "This is a family community. We don't tolerate suspicious activity or strange appearances." I blinked in disbelief. Suspicious activity? She's sitting on her own porch. Karen narrowed her eyes. "Don't play dumb, James. You know the HOA rules about proper neighborhood presentation. Children loitering outside in that condition, it's alarming to residents." I clenched my jaw. My daughter's condition? She was talking about her shaved head, about cancer. Before I could respond, Karen whipped out her phone. "If you won't do something, I will. I'm calling the police. This doesn't look right. For all I know, she could be some delinquent or addict hanging around here." Lily's face went pale. "Dad," she whispered, trembling. That was the last straw. I stepped between Karen and my daughter. "You're not calling anyone," I said sharply. But Karen ignored me, already dialing. "Yes, hello, this is Karen Wilcox, president of the Willow Ridge HOA. There's a strange girl sitting outside number 42 Maple Lane. She's bald. Looks sick or dangerous, I don't know, but she's making the neighbors uncomfortable." Lily looked like she wanted to disappear. Tears filled her eyes as she pulled the blanket tighter. I took a deep breath, reminding myself I was still wearing the badge beneath my jacket, the one she clearly didn't know about. "Karen," I said evenly, "you're making a huge mistake." She huffed, turning her back to me. "The mistake is allowing people to make this place look like a halfway house. I have a duty to maintain standards." Within minutes, the sound of sirens echoed faintly from the main road. I watched Karen's face light up with self-satisfaction, as though she had just saved the neighborhood from an invading threat. Lily's voice trembled. "Dad, are they really coming here?" I nodded softly and knelt beside her. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let them come. They'll see the truth." A patrol car rolled into the cul-de-sac, tires crunching on the pavement. 2 officers stepped out, officers I knew very well. I trained one of them myself. Their eyes flicked between Karen, who was eagerly waving them over, and me, standing calmly with my arms crossed. "This is the girl I told you about." Karen started immediately, gesturing wildly at Lily. "She's been sitting here for an hour, bald-headed, looking suspicious. We can't have people like that loitering around the neighborhood." The officers exchanged a look, then one of them turned to me, barely suppressing a smirk. "Morning, Sergeant Miller," he said. Karen froze mid-sentence. "As Sergeant." I stepped forward slowly. "That's right, Karen. I'm Sergeant James Miller, Willow County Police Department. And that girl you just reported is my daughter, Lily. She's a cancer patient." Silence. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Karen's face went from flushed red to ghost white in seconds. "She's your daughter?" she stammered. "Yes," I said, my voice steady but cold. And you just called the police on her because she doesn't fit your idea of what a normal neighbor should look like. One of the officers coughed awkwardly, clearly embarrassed for her. Karen's mouth opened and closed as she searched for words. I didn't know, she muttered. She looked out of place, and I thought. You thought wrong, I cut in. You thought your title gave you the right to judge people without understanding what they're going through. You humiliated a sick teenager just to make yourself feel powerful. Karen took a step back. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did, I said quietly. You always mean to. You've been watching our house ever since we moved in, nitpicking everything. Our grass length, our porch decorations, even the color of our mailbox. But this is a new low. Lily stood up then, her small hands clutching the edges of her blanket. It's okay, Dad, she said softly, her voice shaking. She doesn't understand. But I could see the hurt in her eyes, the shame that no child should feel for simply being sick. Karen's lip trembled. I didn't realize she was. Because you never asked, I interrupted. You just assumed the worst. The other officer gently placed a hand on my shoulder. We'll file a report about the misuse of emergency services, sir, he said, giving me a nod. We're sorry about this. I nodded. Thanks, Officer Daniels. Karen's head snapped toward him. A report? Wait, no, you can't do that. I was just concerned for the neighborhood. Concern doesn't give you the right to harass people, Daniels replied firmly. You called 911 over a child sitting on her porch. That's an abuse of resources. Karen sputtered, her voice rising. I'm the HOA president. And I'm the law, I said flatly. And right now, the law says you owe my daughter an apology. Karen's face twisted, as if the very word apology burned her throat. She turned toward Lily, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. I apologize, young lady. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable. Lily managed a weak nod, her eyes glistening. The officers stepped back toward their car, giving me a respectful nod before leaving the scene. As the sound of the siren faded, the cul-de-sac returned to silence. Karen lingered awkwardly, still clutching her phone. I hope you understand, Sergeant, she said softly. I was just trying to protect the community. I looked at her with calm fury. You don't protect the community by attacking its most vulnerable member. Then I turned and led Lily inside, closing the door behind us. Inside, she sank into the couch and burst into quiet tears. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight. You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart, I whispered. You're the bravest person I know. But deep down, anger simmered in me like a wildfire. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Karen needed to learn what compassion meant, and I intended to make sure she did. ChatGPT said. The next morning arrived heavy with tension, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I barely slept the night before, not because of what Karen did, but because of how deeply it had wounded Lily. She wasn't angry, she was ashamed. My strong, brave little girl, who had endured months of chemotherapy without losing her smile, now flinched at the thought of stepping outside our front door. She sat by the window, staring at the porch where the confrontation had happened. Dad, she said quietly, everyone must think I'm weird now. I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair, or where her hair used to be, from her forehead. No one thinks that, honey. You didn't do anything wrong. Karen's the one who embarrassed herself, not you. But she's the HOA president, Lily whispered. People listened to her. That stung because it was true. In a community like Willow Ridge, Karen's word carried influence, even if it was rooted in ignorance. She had a following, neighbors who nodded obediently at her rules, terrified of crossing her. And I knew that if I didn't act, her version of the story, whatever lie she told, would spread faster than the truth. So I made a decision. By mid-morning, I had drafted an official complaint against her for misuse of emergency services. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. When you wear a badge as long as I have, you learn that rules only matter when everyone is held to them, not just the people you dislike. As I printed the document, my phone buzzed. It was Officer Daniels. Hey, Sarge, he said. You're not gonna believe this. Karen came down to the precinct this morning. I raised an eyebrow. Really? What for? She's trying to retract her report, he said with a chuckle. Claims it was all a misunderstanding. Says she was acting in good faith as a community leader. I sighed. Let me guess, she doesn't want it on record that she called 911 on a cancer patient. Exactly. The chief already knows what happened, though. The call log's permanent. Good, I said firmly. Let her feel a fraction of the embarrassment she put my daughter through. After the call, I looked at Lily again. She was curled up with her sketchbook, drawing something quietly. When I asked what it was, she turned it around to show me, a cartoon of a bald superhero with a big smile and a shining badge on her chest. That's you, she said. Super Lily. I felt my throat tighten. Even after everything, she was still trying to smile. Later that afternoon, as if the universe wanted to test my patience, Karen showed up again. Her SUV rolled into my driveway, and she stepped out in her usual power outfit, heels, clipboard, and an expression that screamed damage control. I opened the door before she even knocked. Karen. Sergeant Miller, she said with forced politeness. May I come in? I'd like to clear the air. I hesitated. Every fiber of me wanted to tell her to leave, but I saw Lily watching from the couch, her eyes wide and uncertain. So I nodded. Fine. Make it quick. Karen stepped inside, her heels clicking across the hardwood floor. I wanted to personally apologize again, she began. I truly didn't mean to upset your daughter. I was just concerned about the safety and image of our neighborhood. I folded my arms. Concerned enough to call 911 on a child? She flinched but continued. I made a mistake. But as HOA president, I have to ensure the community remains comfortable for everyone. Comfortable, I repeated, my voice rising slightly. You made a 15-year-old girl feel like a criminal because she doesn't have hair. You humiliated her in front of her own home. Karen's lips tightened. I didn't know she was sick. How was I supposed to? You could have asked, I interrupted. You could have walked up with kindness instead of suspicion. For a moment, Karen seemed to falter. The confident facade cracked, and I caught a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But it was fleeting. She straightened her shoulders again, trying to regain control. I came to make things right, she said. If you'd let me, I'd like to organize a community event, something positive. Maybe a charity fundraiser. We could make it about cancer awareness. Her tone was transactional, rehearsed, the kind of apology that came from someone who feared consequences, not remorse. I studied her for a long moment. You want to turn my daughter's pain into your public relations stunt? Karen blinked. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, I said, stepping closer. You don't care about Lily. You care about the HOA's image and your reputation. You called the police because her appearance didn't fit your idea of community standards. That's not leadership, Karen. That's prejudice. She looked stunned, her mouth opening and closing without words. Before she could recover, Lily's voice came softly from behind me. It's okay, Dad. We both turned. She was standing there, small and pale, holding her drawing. If she wants to help, maybe she can. But only if she means it. Karen stared at her, clearly thrown off by the child's kindness. For once, she seemed speechless. Lily held out the drawing. This is Super Lily. She's me. She fights people who are mean to others. But she forgives them too, because that's how she wins. I felt a pang in my chest. My daughter, fragile, bald, and brave beyond words, was teaching an adult what humanity looked like. Karen took the drawing slowly. That's very nice, she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. Lily smiled faintly. You can keep it. Maybe it'll remind you not to judge people. Karen nodded stiffly, unable to look either of us in the eye. She turned and left without another word, climbing into her SUV and driving off. For a long time, I stood there in silence, watching the taillights disappear. Dad, Lily said softly. Do you think she'll change? I sighed. I don't know, sweetheart. But you gave her a chance to. That evening, I got a call from the HOA board. Apparently, word had spread fast. Not about Lily's illness, but about Karen's outburst. A few neighbors had witnessed the scene the day before and were furious. They wanted a meeting. About time, I muttered. When I hung up, Lily was watching me from the couch. Are you going to get her in trouble? She asked. I'm going to make her understand, I said. There's a difference. The next night, the community center was packed. Residents filled the folding chairs, murmuring among themselves. Karen sat stiffly at the front table, her clipboard placed neatly before her, pretending not to notice the glares directed her way. I entered quietly, wearing my uniform this time. The chatter softened as I approached the microphone. Evening, everyone, I began. I'm Sergeant James Miller, and I live here in Willow Ridge, just like you. Yesterday, some of you might have seen an incident outside my home involving my daughter. A few heads nodded. My daughter Lily is 15. She's battling cancer. She shaved her head because she's brave enough to face it head-on. But yesterday, someone decided her appearance was a problem. Someone decided she didn't belong. Karen's face tightened, but she said nothing. I continued. That's not what this neighborhood should be about. We talk about community standards, but maybe we've forgotten what community actually means. It's not about keeping lawns perfect or fences straight. It's about taking care of each other. The room was silent. Even Karen seemed to shrink in her seat. Lily shouldn't have to hide in her own home because someone thinks she looks different, I said. No child should. And if being part of this community means we judge others by appearances, then maybe the standards are wrong, not the people. I stepped back. The applause started slowly, then grew louder. Neighbors stood, clapping, not for me, but for Lily, who sat shyly in the front row, her bald head shining under the fluorescent lights. Karen stayed seated, face pale, but I saw something shift in her expression, a realization she couldn't deny anymore. When the meeting ended, she approached me quietly. Sergeant, she said, her voice softer this time. For what it's worth. I really am sorry. I looked at her for a moment, then nodded once. Then prove it. Be better. She nodded, holding Lily's drawing to her chest like it was something fragile. Outside, under the glow of the streetlight, Lily slipped her hand into mine. You think she learned her lesson, Dad? I smiled. I think she's starting to. ChatGPT said. A few days passed after the HOA meeting, and the neighborhood began to feel different. Quieter, more aware. The gossip that once trickled through our cul-de-sac about who painted their fence the wrong shade, or whose trash cans were left out too long had stopped entirely. People waved more often now, even the ones who used to look the other way when Karen strutted by. It was as if Lily's courage had shaken something loose in them, a reminder that compassion mattered more than control. For Lily, though, the emotional bruises lingered. She still hesitated to sit outside, still peeked through the blinds before stepping onto the porch. Every time she saw a car slow down or someone walking by, her shoulders tensed. She didn't say it, but I could tell the memory of Karen's accusation was still fresh, still echoing. One morning, I came downstairs to find Lily sitting at the table with a small box in front of her. What's that? I asked. She smiled shyly. You'll see. She opened it to reveal several colorful ribbons and handmade bracelets, each one carefully woven. I'm making these for the other kids at the hospital. Some of them have to stay there for weeks. I thought if they had something small and bright to wear, they'd feel a little braver. I felt a lump rise in my throat. That's beautiful, sweetheart. She grinned. I was thinking, maybe we could make a bunch and sell them to raise money for the cancer ward. Like a fundraiser. Her words made me pause. A fundraiser. The same idea Karen had mentioned, though hers was clearly for her own image. But hearing it come from Lily gave it meaning. That's a wonderful idea, I said softly. But it should be yours, not anyone else's. She nodded. Maybe we can do it right here in the neighborhood. People would help, right? I wanted to believe that. And honestly, after what had happened, I thought they might. That afternoon, I sent out a message through the community forum, Neighborhood Fundraiser for Pediatric Cancer Awareness, hosted by Lily Miller. Within an hour, responses started flooding in. Dozens of neighbors offered to help, bringing food, decorations, crafts. Even the families who used to avoid us wanted to contribute. It was as if everyone was trying to make up for the ugliness they'd allowed to go unchecked for too long. But one name stood out in the replies, Karen Wilcox. Her message read, I'd like to help coordinate. I'll cover the cost of decorations and refreshments. I stared at it for a while, not sure how to feel. Part of me still burned with anger, but another part, the one shaped by my daughter's forgiving heart, told me to let her try. When I showed Lily, she smiled. Maybe she really wants to make things right, Dad. Maybe, I said carefully. But we'll keep our eyes open. Over the next week, the neighborhood transformed. Banners went up along the sidewalks. Tables were set up on the cul-de-sac, covered in colorful cloths. Neighbors baked cookies, made lemonade, even donated toys and art supplies for the hospital kids. For the first time since we'd moved to Willow Ridge, it felt like a real community. Karen was everywhere that week, but not in the same way as before. She wasn't barking orders or handing out citations. She was helping. She showed up early, stayed late, and even apologized to a few residents for being too strict in the past. The night before the event, she stopped by our house again. This time, she came without a clipboard, just a plate of cookies and a nervous smile. I wanted to thank Lily, she said, standing awkwardly on the porch. She inspired something good here. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Lily smiled, accepting the cookies. It's okay, Miss Karen. Everyone makes mistakes. Karen's eyes softened. Not everyone admits them as gracefully as you do. I watched the exchange in silence, surprised by how genuine Karen seemed. Maybe Lily's drawing really had reached her in some way. The next morning dawned bright and perfect. The cul-de-sac buzzed with laughter and chatter. A large banner stretched between two mailboxes read, Super Lily's Hope Fair. Tables overflowed with crafts, baked goods, and raffle tickets. Lily wore a simple pink scarf around her head and a shirt that said, Braver Than Yesterday. She stood proudly behind her little bracelet booth, smiling as people stopped by to buy one. Karen, to her credit, kept herself busy. She ran errands, coordinated volunteers, even personally handed out flyers. There was no arrogance in her that day, just quiet effort. When the local paper showed up to cover the story, the reporter asked Lily for a quote. My daughter, always humble, said, I just wanted to make people smile. Cancer makes you lose a lot. Your hair, your energy, sometimes your friends. But it can't take your kindness away unless you let it. Her words left everyone speechless. Even Karen had tears in her eyes. As the event went on, I noticed her standing off to the side, watching Lily with a mix of admiration and regret. Finally, she approached me. Sergeant, she said softly, I want to donate all the proceeds from my HOA fund to the hospital, in Lily's name. I raised an eyebrow. The HOA fund? That's a big gesture. She nodded. I already spoke to the board. They agreed. After the meeting the other night, they realized they'd lost touch with what this community should represent. Lily reminded us. I studied her face. For once, there was no self-interest, no pretense, just sincerity. I appreciate that, I said finally. You're doing the right thing. Karen nodded. I hope it's not too late to be part of something good. Lily ran up then, her hands full of bracelets. Dad, we sold all of them. She was beaming, her cheeks glowing with joy. Can you believe it? I crouched down smiling. I can. You did this, Lily. You brought everyone together. She turned toward Karen. Even you, Miss Karen. Karen laughed softly, wiping at her eyes. Yes, even me. That afternoon, the fundraiser raised over $5,000, far beyond what anyone expected. The entire neighborhood came together for a cause that mattered. There were smiles, laughter, and for the first time, real unity. When the event ended and the sun began to set, Lily climbed onto the small stage we'd built near the sidewalk. The microphone looked oversized in her tiny hands, but she stood tall. Thank you, everyone, she said, her voice steady. When I first got sick, I thought my life was getting smaller. But today, it feels bigger than ever, because of you. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know I'm not alone. And that means everything. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Afterward, Karen approached me again, her voice trembling. Sergeant Miller, thank you for not giving up on me. I didn't deserve your patience. I looked at her for a moment before replying. It wasn't me you should thank. It was Lily. She smiled faintly. I know. She's a better leader than I ever was. We shook hands, not as enemies, but but as people who had finally learned something about grace. That night, after everyone had gone home, Lily sat on the porch swing again, her blanket around her shoulders. The same place where it all began. She looked up at me. "It feels different now, doesn't it?" I smiled. "Yeah. The porch, the neighborhood, everything." She leaned against my side. "Do you think Karen really changed?" I glanced toward the street where Karen's house sat, its porch light glowing softly. "Maybe she didn't change who she is," I said thoughtfully. "Maybe she just remembered who she could be." Lily smiled at that, her eyes closing as the soft evening breeze brushed against her face. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace return to our little corner of the world. The weeks that followed the fundraiser felt like a fresh chapter, not just for us, but for the entire neighborhood. Where once there had been gossip, suspicion, and petty rules, there was now laughter, kindness, and a shared sense of pride. The success of Super Lily's Hope Fair had sparked something genuine, a ripple of empathy that no HOA policy could ever enforce. Lily's story had made it to the local news, then to the city paper. Suddenly, people were sending letters, cards, and small donations to our mailbox. Neighbors we'd never spoken to before dropped off casseroles and blankets. The hospital even called to say they wanted to start an annual Super Lily Day for the pediatric oncology ward, a day dedicated to celebrating strength, courage, and compassion. Every time I saw her smile, I felt the heaviness of the past slowly lift. But the battle wasn't over. Cancer doesn't care about happy endings. It comes and goes like a storm, unpredictable and cruel. One evening, after her checkup, the doctor told us the treatments were finally showing progress. The tumors had shrunk. Her body was responding. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time in months, there was real hope. When I told Lily, she gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. "Does that mean I'm getting better?" I nodded, my eyes stinging. "It means you're fighting, and it's working." She jumped up and hugged me tight. "Then I'm going to keep fighting, Dad. For me, for the kids at the hospital, for everyone." Her spirit was unstoppable, and it began to inspire more people than I could count. Even Karen. She had changed, and not in a superficial way. Gone were the heels and clipboard. Now she wore sneakers and a smile that looked sincere. She stopped writing citations and started writing thank you notes. She'd begun visiting the hospital with Lily, bringing flowers and snacks for the children there. Sometimes I caught her just sitting quietly in the pediatric ward, holding the hand of a frightened parent. One day, as we walked through the hospital together, she looked at me and said, "I used to think leadership meant control. Now I realize it's about service. Your daughter taught me that." I gave a small nod. She has that effect on people. Karen smiled sadly. "I just wish I'd learned it before I heard her." "She forgave you, Karen," I said. "She moved on. You should too." Karen nodded, her eyes glistening. "Maybe one day I'll forgive myself." Back at home, the changes continued. The HOA, once a symbol of Karen's power, transformed into something more human. The board voted to allocate part of its annual budget to support local families dealing with illness. Neighbors volunteered to mow lawns, cook meals, and drive kids to school for parents who were struggling. Lily was the heartbeat of it all. She'd set up a small kindness corner in front of our house, a wooden table with painted letters that read, "Take one, leave one, kindness is free." On it, she left bracelets, cards, and tiny drawings for anyone who needed a smile. It became a neighborhood ritual. Kids would stop by after school, adults before work. One morning, I watched as Karen knelt beside the table, leaving a small bouquet of daisies and a handwritten note. When she walked away, I picked it up. The note said, "To Super Lily, you taught me what strength really means. Thank you for saving more than one life." I folded it gently and tucked it into Lily's scrapbook, a growing collection of love and gratitude from the people she'd touched. Months passed, and autumn painted the trees gold and crimson. The crisp air felt alive with possibility. Lily's hair had begun to grow back, soft, short tufts that she liked to ruffle in front of the mirror. She'd gained weight, color, and laughter again. One Saturday morning, we were sitting on the porch, her in her blanket, me with my coffee, when Karen appeared, holding a small box. "Morning, Sergeant," she greeted softly. "Lily." "Hi, Miss Karen." Lily chirped, smiling. Karen sat on the steps. I brought something for you. She handed the box to Lily, who opened it carefully. Inside was a shiny gold medal with a blue ribbon. On it, engraved words read, Super Lily, our neighborhood hero. Lily gasped. Wow, it's beautiful. Karen smiled. The HOA voted on it. We thought it was time for a new kind of award, not for perfect lawns or painted fences, but for courage and kindness. Tears welled up in my eyes as Lily held the medal to her chest. Thank you, she whispered. Karen nodded. No, thank you. That evening, the neighborhood gathered again, this time not for a meeting or fundraiser, but for celebration. Lights twinkled across the lawns, laughter echoed through the cul-de-sac, and for the first time since we'd moved in, it felt like home. Karen stood beside me as the crowd cheered for Lily, who stood proudly at the front, her medal shining in the porch light. You know, Karen said quietly, I used to think I knew what perfection looked like. Straight fences, trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes. But it's this right here. People coming together, not tearing each other apart. I smiled faintly. Took you long enough to figure that out. She chuckled softly. Guess I needed the right teacher. Lily was laughing with the neighborhood kids, her joy radiating like the warm glow of a lantern. I watched her, pride swelling in my chest. For so long, I'd carried anger, resentment, and fear of losing her, fear of what people might say. But that night, all of it melted away. When the festivities ended, Karen approached Lily one last time. You know, Super Lily, she said, crouching down to her level, if you ever run for HOA president, I'll vote for you. Lily giggled. Only if I can make a rule that everyone has to be kind. Karen grinned. Then I'd follow that rule gladly. The next morning, I sat alone on the porch, the same one where all the chaos had begun. The wind rustled the leaves, carrying faint echoes of laughter from the night before. I thought about how much had changed, how a moment of cruelty had transformed into months of compassion. It struck me how thin the line was between ignorance and understanding, between hate and healing. One act of bravery, one child's forgiving heart, had tipped the scales. The sound of footsteps pulled me from my thoughts. Lily came out, her blanket around her shoulders. What are you thinking about, Dad? I smiled. Just how proud I am of you. She leaned against me, her voice soft. I'm proud of you too. For what? I asked. For being the kind of police officer who doesn't just protect people, but teaches them what kindness means. Her words hit me deeper than any commendation or medal ever could. I looked down at her, my heart full. You know, Lily, sometimes we think we're the ones teaching others lessons. But really, you've been teaching all of us. She grinned. Even Miss Karen? Especially Miss Karen. We sat there in silence for a while, watching the sun rise over the neat rows of houses that no longer looked perfect, but finally felt human. The porch swing creaked gently beneath us as the morning light touched Lily's medal, making it gleam like a small sun. And in that moment, I realized something simple but profound. Real beauty doesn't come from perfection. It comes from compassion, forgiveness, and the courage to be kind when it's hardest. Lily had taught us all that. The neighborhood would never be the same again, and neither would I.